Hey there, Hoops Tragics. Be sure to check out the latest basketball t-shirts on AussieHoopla.com. We've got a range of hard-to-find tees which feature Steph Curry, Michael Jordan, LeBron James, as well as a host of retro NBA designs. They're currently available on eBay, but all designs can be seen on our website, AussieHoopla.com. And now it's time to bring on the host of Aussie Hoopla, Dan Boyce.
Sounds like a lot of...
Hoopla!
It sounds like a lot of...
Hoopla!
Sounds like a...
Hoopla!
Thanks again for hitting the download button once more and listening to the best damn Australian basketball podcast on the net, Aussie Hoopla. As always, you're listening to the voice of Aussie Hoopla, Dan Boyce. And, well, the NBL Grand Final Series is upon us. Perth and New Zealand, once again, the third time in 6 years these teams will face off. And if you haven't heard it already, we just got off a chat with Townsville Crocodiles coach Sean Dennis discussing who is likely to win the championship game, as well as what things for fans to look at. So I encourage you to go back, check out the Sean Dennis podcast that was recorded just prior to this one. But of course, this episode is about the man, the myth, the legend himself, Andrew Gaze. Now with Drewy, there's been 100 interviews out there in print, podcast or video form talking about his time in the NBA, talking about, his championships with the Tigers, talking about the Boomers. There's not, if you've read the Andrew Gaze story, A Kid, a Ball, a Dream, you'll know what I'm talking about. There's not much about this guy's life that isn't out there in print, but I wanted to ask him some questions that, are ones that don't generally get asked of Andrew. Asking some hard-hitting ones about whether, the Tigers underachieved or overachieved during his time there. We get his feedback on Ben Simmons and whether he deserves to play in the Australian Boomers team, and a whole lot more. So I hope you enjoy it. I really did try and stay away from the usual questions and therefore the usual rhetoric. Really hope you enjoy it. But before I kick into that, I need to mention the good friends and sponsors of the Aussie Hoopla podcast, Appamate. They're the guys you need to be speaking to if you have an app idea. They've got offices in Melbourne and Sydney, and they're already developing apps for Adidas, Coles and Subway, as well as many of Australia's up-and-coming entrepreneurs. The team are focused on being a real-life app partner for their clients instead of just a development team. So what that means is they can help you at the very concept of your app, identifying if the app idea has value, if it would work, what type of functionality it would need. They've helped numerous businesses then develop apps and also qualify for government grants. These grants pay up to 45% of the app's total costs. So they're really making a big difference there and going out where other companies aren't. They can also help with marketing and support once you go live. And so basically, like I said, they're there from start to finish, concept to success. And all you have to do to speak with them is call 1300 781 794, or you can visit the website appamate.com.au for more details. So, we've been a little quiet on the podcast front. So again, if you hadn't noticed, we chatted with Sean Dennis, reigning NBL Coach of the Year before this. I encourage you to head back and listen to that interview. Great to get his idea on how he's going to be improving the Townsville Crocodiles in the upcoming season, what they need to do, as well as the new rule changes likely to come into the NBL. One thing that comes with the NBL Grand Final is the fact that the NBL off-season is almost here. So what you're going to need to do is head to iTunes, head to AussieHoopla.com, and check out our podcasts from the past. There's interviews with Shane Hill, Mark Bradkey, Matt Delvedova, Brett Maher, Stephen Captain Jack Jackson, who won the NBA title with the Spurs. You've got Leon Trimmingham, Robert Rose. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. Plenty of NBL joy for your Hoops Tragic ears to listen to. So make sure you head to iTunes. And as always, we really appreciate anyone who's going to take the time out to leave a review, give us 5 stars so that we can, boost up our exposure on iTunes and have more listeners. So enough from me. Here's our chat with the original factor, the man, the myth, the legend, Andrew Gaze.
It's deep, I am tired, it's the thrill of the
First off, Drewy, thanks for being part of the show. Appreciate it. You taking the time out. I guess first off, I want to congratulate you on welcoming back the Melbourne Tigers to the SEABL. Mate, tell me, what's going on there?
Well, it's the club's been around for a good part of 85 years, and it's never really gone anywhere, albeit that it's, but not playing at the highest level at the NBL is a setback a couple of years ago, but it's continued on, and we've always had a very strong and vibrant junior competition, and it's an association-based team that we have in the SEABL. So it's, I guess it's just continuing to grow, and ever since the club was formed, it's had a goal to play at the highest level. It's kind of in its mission statement, so to speak, to strive to play at the highest level. So hopefully this is a pathway that can bring us back into the highest level of the competition.
Yeah, that's fantastic. There's a lot of people excited about seeing the obviously the junior teams have been there, and I guess big V teams, but the SEABL, it's at least a semi-professional league, seeing everyone back. Have you got how's the roster look on paper? I know that there's a certain gentleman from Sale who's joined the team, Reece Carter. Who else is on the team?
Yeah, we've got Reece on board. Reece has done a few tours with me to China, so I've got to know Reece quite well and got great respect for his game and the passion that he brings to it. Beyond just the X's and O's and the skills of the game, he brings a tremendous desire to compete, and it's the sort of values that we like to have in our team. And we got Daryl Coletta, who's coming back now. He's only going to be available for probably about half the season. He's currently playing in England, where he's the captain coach of a team in England. And following the season,
secretary and CEO, isn't he as well?
I don't know.
Pretty much everything.
I'm not sure how far his duties extend, but once the season's over, his club team over there is doing a tour of China as well. So, unfortunately, he won't be with us until about the start of June. But to have a quality player like that in our team, a man that grew up playing for the Melbourne Tigers through the junior program and then graduated into the senior ranks in the NBL, and I actually played alongside him for many years, and he's won NBL titles. And just last week, he was named in the All-Star 5 for the week's performances. He had 32 points on last weekend, playing for his club team over there in England. So he's in pretty good shape, playing well, and we're really looking forward to him coming back. And then we've got a couple of imports. We've got Rob Jones, who those that follow St Mary's would be familiar with him. He played a couple of years at St Mary's, American player, and averaged 16 and 10, I think it was, back in 2011 in his senior year. So he's going to be a real quality player. I'd say that he would have, the way it reads and comparing him to other players that's come to Australia, he's a NBL quality import that we've been fortunate enough to get to play with us. And then our other import spot is something a little different. It's I've got a Chinese player coming. So it's a guy that was part of the junior Chinese national team, played in the Under-19 World Championships. And
wow,
it's just something different for the competition. And it's going to be a challenge because his English is not great. But anytime you got a guy 6'10", that you're prepared to tolerate some of those challenges when you're 6'10". So hopefully we can teach him a little something, and then the rest of the roster pretty much just built.
Well, what's your Mandarin like?
No good. A lot of languages, travelling the world, I've got to learn a lot of the swear words, but I don't even know any of those in Chinese, so I'm no good. So it's going to be difficult. He's been around basketball a long time, so he understands basic terminology, but it's it's going to test us a little bit, but we're hopeful that it could be a good exchange program to build up the relationship with his club team over there in China, and hopefully it can lead to bigger and better things.
It's it's funny that you mentioned the experience you've had in Europe. I mean, obviously you've done 100 interviews over your time, mate, and talked about the Spurs championship and playing in Greece and all that type of stuff. But there's one thing that's always jumped out to me in that your book that you did with Granley Bernard there, and Mate, it's the part where you're speaking about one night after winning in Greece. Emotions are high, and you run into the locker room and, a few blokes lighting up with cigars and that type of thing. And all of a sudden you see this singing and chanting from the guys who are already in the shower. They've, the whole team's in there with their arms around each other, jumping up and down with their old fellas slapping around as free as birds is how you put it in there, mate. So I've always wanted to just run that by you, mate, and get, maybe just a couple of Euro stories because, mate, every time I read that book, I always crack up laughing at that little section about Greece and your experiences there. Yeah,
just some of the cultural differences you go with. It certainly took team bonding to another level, but, I think that it's all in good fun. It's just different cultures and the way they do things a little bit differently. And, that's part of the great education you get when you have these experiences. It's not just about the basketball, it's about meeting the people and learning about different cultures and the way they do things. And I think that has really helped me in both on and off the floor. You get a great basketball education, but you get life experiences. And sometimes they're a little bit unusual and you just got to buy into it and you go along for the ride and have fun with it. And it's, I've been blessed to have a couple of great experiences, one in Greece, one in Italy, and of course over in the United States. And, they're all different and I love them all, albeit that my time in both Greece and Italy weren't with real strong teams. You normally equate those types of basketball or sporting experiences with success, but they were highly successful for me because of the experience and the education that I got through them, more so than it was just from simply the win-loss column. So I've loved to have won more games, of course, but that wasn't to be, but it didn't diminish from the experience that I had over there.
What's your thought on Europe and the Australian pipeline, I guess, at the moment? Like, Europe's always been a hotbed for all of our greatest players that head over there. But this year, whether it's to do with a lot of players going to the NBA or, the dollar's not being well or the league being healthy here, we're seeing that, there's not really that many Australians playing, especially in the Euro League. Like, there's really only maybe 3 or so by the time with Brokoff over there and things like that. What do you think? What's happened? What's changed since your time? Because realistically, Europe, 5-10 years ago was where all the boomers were, and now it seems to be not really the hottest place to go to. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think it's mainly because the top ones have graduated from Europe into the NBA. We got 7 guys in the NBA, whereas usually we only had a couple, and the rest had been in Europe. So. Our attentions with our Australian players the high-end Australian players has turned more towards the NBA. And from what I have seen of Ryan Brokoff, he is one that absolutely has the ability to play in the NBA. So, he may be graduating to go over there at some stage in the future as well. Brad Newley has had a very, very good season. He's at the veteran stage of his career now, but still doing extremely well over in Europe. You say the same about David Anderson, who was spectacular in the Oceania qualification series, playing against New Zealand last year, and he's doing very well over there. So there's still a lot of our players playing overseas, and if you look at our Olympic team this year, it's highly likely that probably only 1 or 2 of the guys are going to be Australian-based players playing in the NBL, which a lot of people think that that's a negative. I don't necessarily see it that way. I think that it's indicative of the opportunities that are there for Australian players to play overseas. But I also think it does show how much of a feeding ground that we've been for the rest of the world, and the way in which we can cultivate the talent and teach it to be able to play at the highest level. I think that speaks volume for the programs we have in place here. So it's to me, it's not the end of the world that that's the case, and I don't think it's necessarily to the detriment of the NBL either. Of course, we'd love to have those players playing in the NBL, and of course the competition would be stronger. But that's to say that what we've got here at the NBL or the SEABL or whatever the levels we have here isn't world class. It's still very, very strong.
And I'm not sure if you heard that there was the interview during the week with Andrew Bogut and Bill Simmons, and they discussed, I guess, the Boomers, coming along and how they're progressing. And one of the things they brought up was Ben Simmons and how, it's getting around that he's unhappy about how he was dropped from the World Cup team in 2014, and that he, might not be that focused on playing for the team in Rio. I guess. Yeah, keen to hear your thoughts on that exchange, and I guess does Ben Simmons belong to be on the team in Rio, even if he decided to play?
Yeah, I'm not sure about the rumor and speculation that Ben Simmons was upset or necessarily had some sort of beef with the coaches or Basketball Australia because he didn't make the team. That's certainly not my understanding and Basketball Australia's understanding. Obviously, he's disappointed. Anyone's going to be disappointed when they don't get selected for the Australian team, but he was, relatively speaking, he was a baby, and I don't think that he or anyone associated with his camp holds that against the staff, or there's an axe to grind, or that has any bearing on whether or not he's going to be available for the Olympics this year. I think that he's got some tough decisions that he's got to make in regards to what he's going to prioritise. I don't think anyone would begrudge him the process he's got to go through in order to play in the NBA. He's still a young man, only 19 years of age. He's going to get drafted. He's going to be a top pick, if not the number one pick. He's going to be a top 3 or 4 pick. So with that comes an expectation by most of the NBA clubs that you're going to go through the process of going to Summer League and getting ready for the upcoming season. Now, unfortunately, the Summer League program and the Boomers camp, they clash. So, I haven't, and I don't think they have ruled out him playing for Australia, but I think that the challenge is it's going to be a difficult one, because if he's unable to attend that Boomers camp, then clearly, in my view anyway, I don't think he can be a part of the team, because there's very, very little preparation this year specifically for Rio. That the preparation has been done over the last 3 years, not just what's going to happen prior to it. And they're only playing, I think, 3 or 4 games before the Olympics. So it's a real sort of crash preparation period, because of the guys playing all over the world, and getting them all together is difficult. So hopefully the best case scenario for me, and this may not eventuate, is that the Philadelphia 76ers draft him, and that if Brett Brown, being the head coach of the Philadelphia 76ers and a former coach of the Boomers, understands the development and education that can go on at the Olympic Games as well, and values that just as much as going to a Summer League camp, and then he would be available and hopefully be wearing the green and gold.
Because you've played in those pre-NBA teams before, and obviously the Boomers. So you'd be silly to think. Well, I'd be of the opinion that he's probably going to be able to go up to a lot better competition in those international games than what he would be at a NBA preseason tournament. But what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, absolutely. But I think that those NBA Summer League games, it's not just about what goes on the floor. I think they use that time almost like as a process of induction into the NBA system, where they give them some
do all the courses.
Education both on and off the floor, and get to know the coaches, get to work out, learn about the training routines, develop those habits. Those other things are just as important as for someone in his position who's a very high draft pick as what goes on the floor. So I think that it's not about specifically, well, what's the best competition. It's about what a club believes, and also Ben believes, is going to be in his best interest as far as preparing himself for the NBA. So it's it's a tough situation. It's a shame that his draft year falls on a year where there's an Olympics, because clearly he's a very, very talented individual that we'd love to have involved in the Boomers program.
I agree. I couldn't agree more. I guess, what about, I saw Ben when he came out and they had that exhibition game with the Kings as well as the Melbourne United, and incredible skill set, incredible ability, but I guess in those games you could see when he went up against NBL players that physically, he was lacking compared to, obviously guys that have played over in Europe like Daniel Kickett and things like that, or even Todd Blanchfield. I guess, what are your thoughts on, even if he is available to play, like, is it something that he should, definitely be a part of the team when we consider the guys like maybe, Chris Goulding or Damien Martin or Daniel Kickett, even Adam Gibson perhaps may not make the team due to how competitive it is, and we look at Dante Exum and his role on the 2014 team, which was fairly limited. I know that you were on the 88 team, which had a lot of young guys and experience, and 84 as well, obviously your first season with the Boomers. What are your thoughts on all that as a reality, and share with me your thoughts.
Well, I think that Ben is an exceptional talent, yet he's still very, very young and learning the game. But what he brings to the table is something that you can't teach, and that is incredible athleticism. He's got a good instinct for the game. He can play multiple positions, and his style of play, because of the gifts that he has, you don't teach that. It's just something that you're born with. And I think those skills, if you can put them into an Australian team program where you're going to bring an individual to the team that that is rare in international basketball, then it potentially provides you with an advantage. So he's only going to get better. And I think that though, even right now, with if you look at the makeup of the team, he, in my view, is one that is certainly one of the first ones you pick. But like I said, it does you got to find that balance between all that individual skill and how you incorporate it into the team concepts. And if you're not there for any of the preparation, then I think it's probably too much of a gamble just to throw someone in who's that only 19 and has had very limited experience on the international stage at the senior level, and expect of him to be able to perform to his capacity. So it's a juggling act that the coaches have got to go through. But first and foremost, he's got to be available, and then secondly, you've got to be able to work him into your systems. Now, he is such an incredibly gifted individual that I don't think you need a lot to be able to still get an advantage out of him. You may not get the full capacity, but even with a relatively limited preparation, those skill sets, they don't fall. Doesn't fall out of trees. It's very, very rare. So, I would think that if it was available for those camps, then it'd be worth the gamble to have him involved.
And maybe something a bit closer to home. I'm not sure. Did you actually listen to the interview where Mason, your son, got a little bit of a mention?
Which interview was that?
This is the one with Bill Simmons and Andrew Bogut.
No, I didn't. I didn't hear. I had a lot of people tweet me saying, "This is amazing. Bill Simmons mentioned you in his podcast. You got to check it out." And I haven't had the chance to hear it. Can you fill me in?
Yeah, sure. Basically, all he's saying is Bogut and Bill are talking about the team's chances, and obviously it's the same conversation around Ben Simmons, and Andrew Bogut takes him through the team, all the players, he would obviously know Joe Ingles and Paddy Mills, Aaron Baines, and he starts to realise there's a fair bit of talent there, and says, "Oh, what about Andrew Gaze? He must have some kids running around." And Bogut obviously says, he's got one, but he's a little bit too young at this stage, that type of thing. Does it amaze you how people in America, all the way across the other side of the world, still remember you so vividly from your time at Seton Hall?
It did. It did for a while. But I guess when you're over there and you're part of the college system and you know how big it is as far as the overall sporting landscape, and I had the privileged opportunity to going through and playing in the Final Four, and of course getting to the championship game. And on top of that, it wasn't a regular championship game. It's regarded as one of the all-time great championship finals. So it was, and back when I was playing in '89, unlike it is today, it wasn't like, where every team had some form of foreign player. As a foreigner, particularly as an Australian, they didn't know a lot about Australia, and they didn't know a lot about foreigners playing basketball. So I got a disproportionate amount of attention was thrown on me because I was a foreigner and playing in that game. So as such, the rusted on sports fans in the United States, which there are a lot, that they remember incidences, they remember games, they remember individuals. It's just like if Alex Jezelenko was walking around, everyone would remember that, that mark he took because it was in a grand final, it was a special grand final. Carlton made a heroic comeback and those types of things. Well, although I never had the same impact in that particular game as Alex Jezelenko, the fact that the game was so memorable, I think, a lot of people, particularly the rusted on sports fans like Bill Simmons, would remember that game, and because I was a foreigner, probably something stuck in his head about me as well.
I'm going to hit you with a hard one here, Drew. It's, my thoughts are, it's just talking about, Seton Hall days. If there was a 6'7" shooter today who won the West Regional College MVP, dropped 20 points on Duke in the Final Four, and was the second best player on a team who went 1 point away from being the greatest in college basketball today, or even history maybe, if that was how it went down, I'm pretty sure they'd be given a nice NBA contract. But you achieved all those things, and a nice lengthy contract was something that didn't really eventuate. Why wasn't a more fruitful experience for you in the NBA?
I think it's a combination of things. Certainly back then, unlike it is today, the NBA teams really weren't even looking at international players. It was sort of the start of that process. Luke Longley was very much a part of that, and Vlade Divac, Drazen Petrovic, Sarunas Marshalonis, these types of guys were just breaking onto the scene and getting some opportunities. But it wasn't like they were scouting the world like they are now for talent. And as such, I think that also, I've got my limitations. I'm not a great athlete, and the style of play over there relies heavily on athleticism. So there's a whole bunch of reasons.
It's not how the fans at the Geelong Arena remember.
Well, that's right. We elevated and threw one down, but that was as rare as rock and horse doo-doo for that to happen. So I think that there's a variety of reasons, but I certainly have no regrets. Even for myself, I think back on it, and really it wasn't a significant goal of mine. My boyhood dreams were always about representing Australia and playing at the Olympics. And when I was growing up, again, unlike it is today, the best we could do is my dad have a mate in the States who would send him over a VHS tape of a game here or there, but you wouldn't even see the games. You couldn't jump on the internet and follow the scores and watch the players. Yeah. It was just kind of this mythical league somewhere, and you heard about these great players, and I had Dr. J and Magic and Larry and the posters and Pete Maravich, big life-size pistol Pete Maravich poster on my wall, but I read about them in old Sports Illustrateds, but you never got to see it, so it wasn't like a massive goal of mine, and as such, I always thought of it as a bonus rather than a specific goal. And I think that even when I tried out with the Seattle Supersonics back in '89, I never, for the life of me, was going there thinking I was going to make the team. I was always just going there for experience and those types of things. And I think in hindsight that hurt my chances as well, because I never really actively pursued it. I had some other opportunities, and you talk about regrets. Probably the one that sticks out for me the most was back in the the early 90s where I was offered an opportunity with the Boston Celtics, but it was one of those ones that, at the time, playing with the Melbourne Tigers, with my dad, and thinking, what we were trying to achieve here and build the Melbourne Tigers and make them into a program that had respect and credibility, and be a part of that was a greater priority. And as such, I didn't embrace some of those NBA opportunities that may have been there at an early age as well. So a combination of things, but I certainly don't have any regrets about the decisions that I made.
And I guess, like I said, at the time, many years, you and your dad were trying to establish the Melbourne Tigers, and I guess on a national level they don't exist anymore. And you've got the Melbourne United. They've gone on to be pretty successful this season, and on paper, making the finals, and they've had a fair few sellouts there. And obviously Larry's been a big part of that, and the success of the league. Looking at it in hindsight now, a couple of years down the track with the Melbourne United, do you think it was like? What are your feelings on I guess that brand change now that there's been a bit of time and water under the bridge?
I have no animosity towards Larry and Michael Slopoy, who made the decision, and Vince Crivelli. I have no animosity towards them for the decisions they made, because ultimately they're the ones paying the bills. They're writing out some significant checks and investing in the sport, and they made a decision that they felt that in order for the club or a team to survive in Melbourne, that's what they had to do. So I don't agree with the decision, but given that the level of investment that was involved in order to participate at the highest level, absolutely no regrets. I would have loved at the time for them to make that decision, not at the demise or the expulsion of the Melbourne Tigers. I would have loved for them to have come to the Melbourne Tigers and said, listen, this is what we're thinking. We don't believe that this particular model, because of the branding of the Melbourne Tigers, is sustainable. We want to go down another path. So we're going to start up another team, and you guys figure out what to do with the Melbourne Tigers. Now, at that particular time, the end result would have been the same, because we certainly didn't have the resources at the time, unless we had found some others to be able to continue it. But that way, the identity and the soul of the Melbourne Tigers wasn't going to be compromised. Now, they have done their absolute very best to do that respectfully. They have tried to maintain some sort of affiliation with the Melbourne Tigers and other Victorian-based teams that have been in the competition, not just exclusively Melbourne, but they're trying to embrace all the other teams that have come along. So they've done that respectfully. They've done their best to do it with dignity and to try to not upset people along the way. And I think by and large they've been successful at that. But at the end of the day, Melbourne United is not the Melbourne Tigers. The Melbourne Tigers continues to live. It has a bright, prosperous future. It's got an unbelievably successful, incredibly successful junior development program with its juniors. So it's different. So of course it was gut wrenching and extremely disappointing that not have the Melbourne Tigers represented at the NBL level, but it was understandable and it was done in a respectful and cooperative way. So we have, my dad, myself, most Melbourne Tigers supporters and lovers, of which many have embraced Melbourne United as well, which is great. We think that's fantastic. That the vast majority of them understand the reasons why the decision was made and don't have any animosity towards Melbourne United.
It seems like it's only a matter of time before there's a second Melbourne team in the league, and I mean, you've played in front of 18,000 people in some of those Tigers, Magic, crosstown rivalries and things like that. You've just run through an incredible narrative where if the Melbourne Tigers were able to get an NBL team again to face off against the Melbourne United, wow, what an incredible story that could be, and maybe we can get 22,000 people into that stadium.
Yeah, I mean, that's the goal, and I had a conversation, and I don't believe I'm breaching any confidence that we had within that conversation that I had with Larry Kesselman. Larry, he's not anti-Melbourne Tigers by any stretch. He wants another team here in Melbourne as much as anyone. But based on his experiences, the thing he said to me, he said, Andrew, if someone can show me a business plan that's sustainable for the Melbourne Tigers to be back in the NBL, I'm happy to look at that and consider it. But based on his experiences, he doesn't believe that's possible. But, he's not out there specifically trying to blackball or prevent the Melbourne Tigers from existing. Quite to the contrary. He loves the Melbourne Tigers. He's a Melbourne Tigers fan. That's not what he's trying to do. So I think it's in the short term, it's unlikely that scenario will come to fruition. But it's not because anyone's out there trying to blackball the Melbourne Tigers or there's some sort of anti-Melbourne Tigers sentiment. It's just that everyone, I think, understands that the challenges that the NBL presents for the owners, and this year there's been incredible progress. But, even now and prior, the NBL has functioned on the benevolence and just incredible commitment that owners have to underwrite the sport. Now, I think that's changing because of some of the initiatives that the Larry has put in place and the marketing and presentation that's gone on this year. I think the economics of the sport is beginning to change. It's still a long process, but it's certainly heading in the right direction. And so unless right now there is owners out there that can see the bigger picture, that can see the vision, and has the financial resources to put in place a program that is capable of working with the NBL to grow the sport, it's going to be hard for the Melbourne Tigers to find that type of contributor that has the resources to do that.
And I mean, just prior to jumping onto the phone with you, Drew, we spoke with Sean Dennis and talked about his plans on building the Townsville Crocodiles for next season. It's pretty much set to be announced at the conclusion of the season that Bodinage has written about it as well. We're looking at probably adding an extra import roster spot, so 3 imports per team. They're looking at having up to maybe 4 Australian marquee players, so it gives every Australian no excuse not to come back home and play in our national league. There's even looking at getting a naturalised spot for an Asian player. There's so many changes that seem to be happening, and it's only just a matter of time before they're announced. What are your thoughts on having a number of different viewpoints from that? Obviously, being involved in the Tigers when they've tried to bring out Asian players. You've played against Canberra teams that had 3 imports and experimented with that rule. What are your thoughts on those changes and what it's likely to do for the league?
I individually are very supportive of it. I think that any time we have an opportunity to put better talent on the floor and make the product better, then we have a good situation. The better the product, the better chances you are of having success. And I'm speaking generally here with the entire league. Now, yep. I think a lot of people jump at shadows when they hear an extra import, because even now with 2 imports, some clubs choose to not use the 2 because they have enough talent that they at their disposal anyway. And we have such great talent here in Australia that I have never bought into the argument to say that it having an extra import spot or even going to the extreme of an open market. I don't believe that is to the detriment of developing Australian talent. Now, the argument that's always put up is to say, well, they don't get the chance to play, they don't get the chance to compete against the best because that imports are preventing them. Well, there's a very, very easy answer to that. And the easiest, most simple answer to it for Australian individuals is this. You get better. Because clubs are not stupid. What they want to do is they want to have the best available talent available. And as I look back on my career and reflect on the opportunities I had, I am forever indebted to Brian Goorjian, Alan Westover, Bruce Palmer, Hugh Hobus, Russ Dyer. When I came through and I was started playing at 15 and 16 with the Melbourne Tigers, we had 4 imports on our team.
Wow.
And it certainly didn't hurt. It didn't hurt me and my opportunities. It didn't hurt the other players that were playing with us because we're involved in a competitive situation that we didn't get an opportunity to play by default. That is, will prevent better players playing. It said, well, if you want to play here, you need to get better. You need to work harder. So I take an extreme view. Let's just take an unrealistic, mythical type hypothetical. Would our sport be better if you could transport the NBA and the NBA was played here in Australia? Would that help or hurt the development of our Australian players?
I think everyone's going to say it's going to help, yeah.
I would strongly argue to have the opportunity to compete against the very, very best gives our Australian players the opportunity to get better. So I have an extreme view on that, which is in the unbelievable minority. Very, very few people agree with my belief that I am anti-restrictions full stop. I say clubs are going to make decisions in their best interest, and if in fact that having a team of 9 imports, there'll be impact. That'll impact the attendances. It'll impact the sponsorship. It'll impact a whole variety of the other elements of the business where common sense will prevail, and clubs will eventually make decisions which are in their best interest. So I welcome the new rules that are being proposed. I think that first and foremost, it's about the product on the floor, and certainly I look at interest with the finals this year, and we see New Zealand playing Perth. Now, we have gone out of our way as a league to put in place restrictions in order that there's parity amongst the competition. We have a point system. We have an import regulation. We have a salary cap. We have all these various regulations to provide parity.
Yep.
Who has been in the final the last 6 years? New Zealand or Perth?
And Perth.
So even trying to go down that track of put in place these regulations hasn't had the effect that, well, the evidence, if you're using who's going to play in the finals as the guide to say, well,
you could use the extreme
working?
opposite. You can use the extreme opposite, Drewy. Like, who's been at the bottom of the league? Sydney, Townsville, and like it's the same people every time. So it's like it's the extreme view is the exact same view.
Yeah. So it's interesting. I don't dismiss those, and particularly the Players Association. You know, they I think would put forward some very logical arguments for why there needs to be these types of protection policies for Australian players. Across the checks and balances, though, I think that there's always some sort of compromise middle ground, and I think that they're heading in that direction. But ultimately, the better product on the floor the more Australian players are going to improve, and the more sustainable the sport will be because of the product.
Yep. Yeah, Drewy, it's very unusual. I know for you, you must feel a bit strange being in the minority for once. But but mate, I couldn't agree with you more. I know that you got to head off soon, so I was just going to ask you one last thing. I've always been dying to ask you this question. Growing up in Victoria, obviously watched Melbourne Tigers all my life. Went to the games, loved it. But I guess through that time, it's about 12 years where yourself, Leonard Copeland, Mark Bradkey were all on the same team. Yourself and Mark Bradkey, arguably the best shooting guard and centre in the league throughout that time. I mean, you led the league in scoring for 9 of those years. Bradkey led the league in rebounding for 8 of those years. You had Leonard Copeland, who was on the All-NBL team probably 5 of those years. So you probably had 3 of the top 5 players in the league at any given time for at least 4 or 5 years there, if not maybe more. When you look at having won 2 titles over the 12 years, I know obviously things like finances and the training facilities and the bench obviously play a part of it as well. Imports. Do you look back at that and think that maybe you underachieved or overachieved when you're looking at the success of the Tigers during that 12-year period?
Yeah, I think that it's interesting because I would guess that the general perception would be that, well, there should have been more titles along the way. But, and when you consider some of the talent that we had, particularly at the top end, that there's a solid argument that could be made for that. But I think that success, and for me as a competitor, I never really got too caught up in what others were thinking or the judgments that others will make on a team or an individual's performance. For me, the criteria for success was much, much broader than that. It's about being involved with a group that is fun, that you enjoy playing with, you enjoy spending time with, that you play a style of play that's enjoyable to play in and a style of play that you hope is also enjoyable for the fans to watch. I think that not just using basketball as evidence, but using other sports, I think that most people can see that, yeah, fans want to see their team win. Absolutely. The tribalistic nature of it all, that winning can sort of camouflage some of the other problems that may go along with the sport. But most people, though, want to see an entertaining game of basketball. And I think that what we did and the way we played tried to find that balance, where we put individuals in a situation where they can exploit their individual talent. We play with great respect for the game and our opponents, and you're out there having fun and entertaining. And I think the wins and losses were very, very good. I think if you look back on it, there are times you say, well, if we did this a little bit differently and we did this a little bit differently, that it might have brought about even more success.
Yep.
But I'm comfortable with I'm personally would have loved to have won more titles, but I have no regrets and are very, very grateful to have played in that environment and feel privileged to have been playing.
It'd be tough
with
to change the journey from the sound of it.
Yeah, playing with some of the greats of the game and sharing those experiences and being very successful without necessarily winning the major prize as much as we would have liked.
Yep. Oh, couldn't have said it better, Andrew. It was awesome to get the chance to talk to you and get inside your head a little bit. Appreciate all the time you've taken out. Best of luck for the Tigers. Hopefully we can, you can notch up a third title there, albeit a SEABL one, and mate, well, fourth title, I guess, if you count the Spurs one. Sorry to insult you there, Drewy. But mate, all the best. Nothing but respect for everything you've done for the game, and hope to talk to you soon. Hope to maybe nudge you a little bit and give you a loss when it comes to MSAC basketball Mondays.
No worries at all. Good on you. Thanks very much.
All right, mate. See ya.
See you then.
Bye. I hope you enjoyed that, everyone. We certainly did. Just to reflect back on what we mentioned at the start, there are a ton of interviews with NBL legends in our archives. You need to go to iTunes, type in Aussie Hoopla to find that. Make sure you subscribe. Our podcasts generally come out a few days before they're promoted on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram. I hope you're following Aussie Hoopla on all those social media platforms, at Aussie Hoopla on Twitter as well as on Instagram, and just type in Aussie Hoopla on Facebook to follow us. Check out the website, tons of news, articles, and the like appearing there on all of our Aussies playing home and overseas. And yeah, we'd appreciate you giving us any feedback you can on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, as well as iTunes. If you leave us a review, give us a rating, 5 stars would be nice. It really helps us promote the podcast. And with the NBL off-season almost here, there's going to be plenty of NBL tragics, hankering for some NBL content. That's it for me. Appreciate you, as always, downloading the episode. You can hit me up on any of the social media networks. Let me know what you thought. AussieHoopla.com. I've said it enough times. Make sure you check us out. Until then, keep balling and make sure you continue to support Australian hoops.